When I turned 73, I realized one simple truth. You can only control your own life if you control the lives of others, especially your children. My daughter Rosalind never understood this, and she is still paying for it today. My name is Edith Pembroke, and I have lived long enough to know that weakness is not forgiven in anyone. My late husband, Richard, was a weak man, a talented violinist who traded a career with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra for a teaching position at a music school in provincial West Allis. I still remember the day he told me about his decision. Edith, understand, he said, twirling his thin-rimmed glasses in his hands. Here I will be able to devote more time to you and the baby. Richard was always a master of beautiful words that hid his fear. Fear of failure, fear of competition, fear of real life. I was pregnant with our only daughter and agreed to move to this backwater town. But I never forgave him for that weakness. Our house on Greenfield Avenue became my fortress. I created the perfect facade, a flawless lawn, a white picket fence, geraniums on the windowsills. Our neighbors considered us a model family, and Richard became a local celebrity, a teacher who had trained several famous musicians. No one saw how I despised him every time he came home reeking of cheap cologne and children's sweat from the stuffy classrooms of the music school. Rosalind was born on a spring day when the apple trees were in bloom. She had my dark eyes and stubborn chin, and from day one I knew we would have a difficult relationship. She cried louder than other babies. She demanded more attention. She refused to obey the routine I had so carefully planned for her. She's just a baby, Edith, Richard would say when I insisted that 3-month-old Rosalind sleep on schedule. Babies aren't clocks. But I knew better. I was shaping her character, not just raising a child. Rosalind had to become stronger than her father, better than me. She had to get everything I had missed out on because of his decisions and my excessive softness in my youth. By the age of 5, Rosalind was already taking ballet, piano, and French lessons. By 12, she had added tennis lessons and a math club. I watched her every step, every grade, every acquaintance. Richard thought I was putting pressure on the girl, but the results spoke for themselves. My daughter was the best at everything she did. The rift between us began when she turned 16. Rosalind announced that she was quitting ballet, which she had been doing for 10 years, and in which she showed great promise. I never wanted to dance, Mom, she told me at breakfast, without looking up from her bowl of oatmeal. It was always your dream, not mine. I didn't hit her then, even though I really wanted to. Instead, I smashed her favorite cup with a picture of the Eiffel Tower on it, a souvenir from her French teacher. You're still too young to know what's best for you, I said, watching her pick up the pieces with trembling fingers. Someday you'll thank me for being persistent. But she didn't thank me. From that day on, Rosalind began to distance herself from me. At first, it was small things. She stopped sharing her school stories, locked her bedroom door, spent more time with her friends. Then it became serious. She enrolled at the University of Wisconsin in Madison instead of Chicago, as I had planned. Richard died of a heart attack a week before her graduation. He never got to see her graduate with honors, which I, incidentally, considered insufficiently prestigious. Psychology instead of law or medicine. Another petty act of revenge on her part. After college, Rosalind returned to West Allis, but not to me. She rented an apartment in the northern part of the city and got a job at a private practice. We saw each other once a week for Sunday lunch, which turned into a ritual of polite confrontation. I criticized her choice of clothes, the men she dated, her decision to dye her hair red. She responded with polite smiles and changed the subject to the weather. Everything changed when she met Hugh Caldwell. For the first time in years, I saw in my daughter's eyes what I feared most. She was in love. Hugh worked as a landscape designer, creating gardens for wealthy homes in the suburbs. I saw him for the first time when Rosalind brought him to one of our Sunday dinners. He was tall, with reddish hair and a ridiculous beard that was supposed to compensate for his receding hairline. He handed me a bouquet of wildflowers, a cheap gesture meant to impress a woman who grew prize-winning roses. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Pembroke," he said with a smile that struck me as overly confident. "Rosalind has told me so much about you." "Really?" I smiled coldly in response. "She hasn't said much about you." Rosalind shot me a warning glance, but I ignored it. Lunch was tense. Hugh tried to impress me with stories about his projects, about how he had turned a banker's abandoned plot of land into a Japanese garden. I listened with polite interest, noting all his flaws: his provincial accent, his habit of gesturing with his fork, his overly loud laughter. "Where did you study, Mr. Caldwell?" I asked, when he finished his story about the water cascade he designed for some nouveau riche guy. "Milwaukee Community College," he replied without hesitation. "I've always valued practice over theory." "I see," I said, taking a sip of wine. "And your parents, were they practical people too?" I saw Rosalind tense up. She knew where I was going with this. "My father was a truck driver," Hugh said, still smiling, though now there was a hint of wariness in his eyes. "And my mother worked in a laundry. They were simple people, but they gave my sister and me everything they could." "You have a sister?" I was really interested now. "Yes, Viola. She's 2 years younger than me. She works at a travel agency in Milwaukee." I nodded, mentally adding details to my portrait of the Caldwell family. Working class, no prospects, no connections, no traditions. Not at all what I had planned for Rosalind. After dinner, when Hugh helped clear the table, a gesture meant to impress me, I took Rosalind aside. "Is this serious?" I asked, nodding toward the kitchen, where he was clattering with dishes. "Yes, Mom." Rosalind straightened her back, preparing for battle. "We've been dating for 6 months." 6 months? And you're only introducing him to me now? I knew how you would react. And how do you think I should react? I lowered my voice to a whisper. "He's a gardener, Rosalind, a man who digs in the dirt for money." "He's a landscape designer." Her eyes narrowed. "He has his own business and clients all over the state. A small-time entrepreneur with no education and no prospects. A perfect match for Richard Pembroke's daughter." "My father would be happy to see me happy," she snapped. "And I am happy with Hugh." That ended the conversation, but the war began. I spent the next few months trying to find dirt on Hugh Caldwell. I hired a private investigator to check his background. It turned out he had had problems with alcohol in college, and his business was barely breaking even. But my detective found nothing truly scandalous, nothing that could scare Rosalind away. I tried to introduce her to my friend's son, a promising lawyer from Chicago. I organized dinner parties attended by young doctors and financiers. Rosalind would come, chat politely, and then leave to meet Hugh, who was waiting for her in his car around the corner. The climax came at Christmas, when she announced her engagement. At the holiday table, in front of the pumpkin pie, Rosalind showed off a modest ring with a small diamond. "We plan to get married in the spring," she said, looking me straight in the eye. "And we would like to have the ceremony in the garden behind the house, where Dad loved to read." I felt my face go numb. The garden was a sacred place, Richard's last refuge before his illness, and she wanted to bring this gardener there. "How sweet." I put down my fork. "And I suppose you'll be spending your honeymoon at the plant nursery?" "Mom." Her voice was quiet but firm. "We're leaving. Now. And I won't be coming next Sunday. Not the next one. Or the one after that. Not until you learn to respect my choice." They left, leaving the pie untouched and me in an empty house. That night I realized for the first time that I could truly lose my daughter. This wasn't teenage rebellion or a passing fancy. She was choosing a life without my control, a life where she made the decisions, not me. We didn't talk for 2 months. I knew about the wedding preparations from mutual acquaintances, but I pretended not to care. Pride prevented me from taking the first step, and Rosalind was too stubborn to give in. In the end, I called her myself. I didn't apologize, I never apologize, but I offered a truce. "It's your life," I said when she finally picked up the phone. "And if you've decided to marry this man, I won't stand in your way." "His name is Hugh, Mom," she replied after a pause. "And yes, I am marrying him, with or without your blessing. Well then, with mine. But don't expect me to be thrilled." The wedding took place in May, in our garden, just as she wanted. I watched my only daughter become Mrs. Caldwell, standing next to the tall, red-faced man who was now her father-in-law. His wife, a plump woman in a dress that was too tight, was sobbing into a handkerchief. Standing nearby was Hugh's sister Viola, a thin, pale copy of her brother with an anxious look in her eyes. I smiled for the photos and said the right words, but inside I swore that this wasn't the end. After the wedding, the newlyweds moved into a small house on the outskirts of West Dallas. Rosalind continued to work at the clinic, and Hugh developed his business. I visited them once a month, brought homemade baked goods, and behaved like a model mother-in-law. Hugh seemed to believe in my transformation, but Rosalind always remained wary. Everything changed last winter when Rosalind called me with news that would change everything. Mom, her voice trembled with excitement. Hugh and I are expecting a baby. You're going to be a grandmother. I felt a chill run down my spine. A baby, my grandson or granddaughter, a new chance to do everything right. That's wonderful, dear, I said, and for the first time in many years, my joy was sincere. When is the due date? In August. The doctor says everything is fine. I immediately started planning a nursery in my house for sleepovers, educational toys, books on early development. I knew Rosalind wouldn't have the strength to stand up to me on parenting issues. She had always been soft on important matters, like her father. That evening, I took out the photo album with Rosalind's childhood pictures and looked at them for a long time. A little girl in a frilly dress at the Christmas tree, a teenager with a serious look on her face at a piano competition, a graduate in a cap and gown, diploma in hand. My daughter. My continuation. I did everything right, I thought then. Despite her rebellion, despite her poor choice of husband, I raised her to be a decent person. And now I would have a second chance, a grandson whom I could shape from the very beginning, avoiding the mistakes of the past. If only I had known then what lay ahead, I might have acted differently. But at that moment, I was full of hopes and plans. Edith Pembroke never loses, and the fight for my unborn grandson was just beginning. Pregnancy changed my daughter. Rosalind developed a new softness that I had not noticed in her before. Even her features seemed to soften. Her cheekbones became less sharp, her gaze warmer. To my surprise, she began calling me more often, asking for advice that she would have ignored before. Mom, do you remember what helped you with morning sickness? She asked in her 4th month, when the nausea wouldn't go away. I told her about lemon water and ginger tea, about how I carried saltine crackers in my purse and ate one every hour. She listened attentively and took notes. It was a new feeling, to be needed by my daughter, to be the expert she turned to. In May, when Rosalind was 5 months pregnant, I offered to renovate the room that was to become the nursery in their small house. It was a strategic move, to gain access to their home, to position myself at the center of the preparations for the baby's arrival. I can hire workers, I said during Sunday tea in their living room. It will be my gift. Hugh frowned. He always took any suggestion that he couldn't provide for his wife on his own very hard. Thank you, Mrs. Pembroke, but we can manage on our own. I've already started the preparations. Would you like to see? He led me into a small room next to their bedroom. The walls were half-painted mint green, and there were protective sheets and tools on the floor. We decided not to find out the sex of the baby, explained Rosalind, standing in the doorway. Her hand rested on her already noticeable belly. That's why we chose neutral colors. I looked around the room critically. It was small, with one narrow window. Not what I had planned for my grandson. Well, if you do need help. I left the sentence unfinished. Of course, Mom, Rosalind smiled. But I could see it was a polite smile, nothing more. That same evening, I made my first entry in a notebook titled Grandson, Granddaughter, a list of everything that needed to be done before and after the baby was born. Prepare a room in my house, study the latest early development techniques, gather information about the best nurseries, enroll the child in the music school where Richard taught. His colleagues were still working there and could give his grandson special attention. I planned everything down to the smallest detail, as I always did with important matters. It was a hot summer. Rosalind had a difficult time during the last months of her pregnancy. I visited them twice a week, bringing fresh fruit and homemade meals. Hugh, to his credit, was attentive to his wife. He installed extra fans in the house, gave her foot massages every evening, and ran out for ice cream at night when she had bouts of uncontrollable appetite. I think he's even grown to love you a little more, I joked once when Rosalind and I were alone. Hugh was in the garden trimming the hedge. He's always loved me, Mom, she said, putting down the book on breastfeeding she had been reading. You just didn't want to see it. I ignored the sarcasm. Have you chosen a name yet? If it's a boy, Nathaniel, after Hugh's grandfather. If it's a girl, Lillian. Nathaniel Caldwell. I tried the name out loud. It seemed foreign, not belonging to my family. What about Richard? Your father would be touched. Something flashed in Rosalind's eyes. Guilt? Regret? Maybe as a middle name, she said. We're still discussing it. At the end of July, with only 3 weeks to go before the due date, a new resident arrived at the Caldwell's house. Viola, Hugh's sister, arrived in her beat-up Ford with 2 suitcases and a cat in a carrier. I met her during an unplanned visit. Rosalind hadn't warned me about the guest's arrival, and when I arrived with another batch of homemade food, I was surprised to see an unfamiliar woman in the living room. "Oh, Mom!" Rosalind looked embarrassed. "This is Viola, Hugh's sister. She'll be staying with us for a while. Viola, this is my mother, Edith." Viola was a thin woman with fine red hair gathered in a careless bun. Unlike her brother, she was pale with a scattering of freckles across her face. Her eyes, gray-green like Hugh's, seemed too large for her narrow face. "It's very nice to meet you, Mrs. Pembroke," she said, extending her hand. Her handshake was weak, her palm cold and clammy. "It's so nice to meet you. Hugh and Rosie have told us so much about you." Rosie. No one had ever called my daughter by that childhood nickname. "Likewise," I smiled, studying her. "Are you staying long?" "Well," Viola glanced at Rosalind as if seeking support. "I haven't decided yet. I'm taking a little break from work." "Viola got divorced," Rosalind explained, "and she decided to change her surroundings." "Oh," I nodded with feigned sympathy. "How unfortunate and how convenient that you arrived just before the birth of your nephew, or niece." "Yes, I'm very happy to be able to help Rosie in the first few weeks." Viola nervously adjusted a strand of hair. "Besides, my brother and I haven't had a chance to spend time together in a long time." Something about this woman made me wary. Maybe it was her nervousness, or maybe it was the way she kept glancing at Rosalind's belly, or the way Hugh, who had just come home from work, hugged his sister with a special tenderness. "Vi will take care of everything," he said, looking at Rosalind, not me. "We've prepared the guest room." The guest room, the one that had been planned as a nursery, was now given to his sister. I frowned. "Where will the baby sleep?" "The baby will be with us at first," Rosalind explained. "And then—" She paused, not finishing her sentence. "And then we'll see," Hugh finished for her. Maybe Viola will have found a place to live by then. I didn't believe a word of it. Something wasn't right here. The nursery given to a sister who had suddenly appeared. Things left unsaid. Strange looks between Hugh and Viola. In the days that followed, I began to visit them even more often, always without warning. Once, arriving early in the morning with homemade pastries, I found Hugh and Viola in the kitchen. They were talking in hushed voices, not noticing my appearance in the doorway. "Are you sure she'll agree?" Viola asked, clutching her coffee cup with both hands. "This is no joke, Hugh. It's for life." "She loves me," he replied with a confidence I found unpleasant. "And she understands how important this is to you, to both of us." "What will her mother say?" Viola's voice sounded anxious. "She doesn't seem like the kind of woman who would easily accept this." Hugh snorted. "The old witch won't." I coughed loudly and they turned around like children caught in the act. Hugh blushed, and Viola almost dropped her cup. "Good morning," I said, walking into the kitchen with a basket of blueberry muffins. "I hope I'm not too early?" "No, no." Hugh tried to smile. "Rosalind is still asleep. She needs plenty of rest right now." "Of course." I put the basket on the table. "What were you talking about so passionately?" They exchanged glances. "Work," Viola said quickly. "Hugh is offering me a job in his business, in administration." A lie. I could tell by the way her lips trembled, by the way Hugh nodded too quickly in agreement. "What a wonderful idea," I smiled. "A family business." It's so family-oriented. That morning I couldn't find out anything else. Rosalind was still asleep, and Hugh soon left for a meeting with a client. Viola apologized and went to her room, citing a headache. When Rosalind finally woke up, I tried to ask her about Hugh's sister. "Tell me more about Viola," I said, helping her settle into a chair with a pillow behind her back. "I heard she got divorced?" Rosalind sighed. Yes, her marriage wasn't very successful. Her husband turned out to be not the person she thought he was. In what way? He, Rosalind hesitated. He didn't want children, and that was always important to Viola. I thought those kinds of things were agreed upon before marriage, not after. He promised they would have children a couple of years after the wedding, but when the time came, he refused. And then it turned out that Viola had problems. It will be very difficult for her to get pregnant. Practically impossible. How sad. I shook my head. And now she plans to live with you? When you're about to have a newborn yourself? Only at first, Mom. Rosalind looked tired, and I felt a pang of guilt for my questioning. She's a big help with the baby preparations, and besides, she needs a family right now. I didn't say anything, but I felt a growing sense of unease. The Barren sister who shows up at the house just before the baby is born. Strange conversations in the kitchen. Things left unsaid. In the days that followed, I tried to observe the interaction between Rosalind, Hugh, and Viola. It seemed to me that Rosalind was too warm toward her husband's sister. They picked out clothes for the baby together, discussed childcare methods, and read the same parenting books. Viola was with her everywhere, at doctor's appointments, prenatal classes, shopping at the baby store. Hugh seemed happy about the friendship between his wife and sister. I often found the three of them in the living room, Rosalind on the couch with her feet on her husband's lap, Viola in the armchair opposite. They laughed, discussed names, and planned for the future. And sometimes it seemed to me that there was something hidden in these conversations that I didn't understand. One evening, a week before the expected due date, I dropped in on them unannounced. The door was unlocked, and I went in when I heard voices coming from the living room. Are you sure you're ready for this? It was Viola's voice, quiet but insistent. Yes, Rosalind replied firmly. We've discussed everything. It's the right decision. Rosie, dear, Hugh said, no one is forcing you. If you've changed your mind, I haven't changed my mind. It's your sister, Hugh. And if we can make her happy, why not? We can always... I entered the room, interrupting their conversation. All three looked startled, as if I had caught them doing something inappropriate. Good evening, I said, looking at them. I hope I'm not interrupting an important conversation? No, Mom, Rosalind tried to smile. We were just discussing plans for the future. What kind of plans? Well, how to organize our lives with a child. She looked at Hugh as if seeking support. Who will get up at night? How to divide responsibilities. And Viola will help, of course, I added, watching their reaction. Yes, Viola nodded too quickly. I'll help however I can. I knew they were lying, all three of them. But I couldn't figure out what exactly. The next day, Rosalind called me early in the morning. Her voice sounded tense. Mom, can you come over? I think my contractions are starting. I was there in 20 minutes. Hugh was bustling around his wife, gathering things for the hospital. Viola sat next to Rosalind, holding her hand and timing the contractions. They're regular now, she said, looking at her watch. Every 8 minutes. We need to go to the hospital. I took charge. Hugh, you drive. Viola can stay. No, Rosalind interrupted me. I want Viola to come with us. I pressed my lips together but said nothing. This was no time for arguments. We reached Aurora Hospital in West Allis in 15 minutes. Rosalind was immediately sent to the maternity ward. Hugh went with her, while Viola and I remained in the waiting area. The hours dragged on agonizingly. Viola nervously flipped through old magazines without reading them. I tried to knit. I had brought an unfinished baby blanket with me, but my fingers wouldn't cooperate. We hardly spoke, exchanging only formal pleasantries about the weather and the hospital coffee. Towards evening, Hugh appeared, tired but happy. It's a boy, he said, smiling. 3.5 kilograms. Everything went well. Viola rushed to hug her brother. I stood a little to the side, waiting for details. And Rosalind, I asked? She's fine. Tired, of course, but she's doing great. She's resting now. When can we see them? In an hour, I think. The nurse promised to let us know. We waited another hour and a half before they let us into the room. Rosalind was lying on a hospital bed, pale with dark circles under her eyes, but smiling. Next to her, in a transparent hospital crib, a bundle wrapped in a blue blanket was sleeping. My grandson. Meet Nathaniel, Rosalind said quietly. I walked over to the bassinet and saw his face for the first time. Tiny, wrinkled, with a tuft of dark hair on top of his head. My grandson, the continuation of our family. He's beautiful, I said, feeling tears well up in my throat. Can I hold him? Rosalind nodded and the nurse helped me pick up the baby. He was so light, so fragile. I looked at his little face, trying to find Rosalind's features, Richard's features. His nose seemed to resemble my husband's, and the shape of his face was like Rosalind's when she was a baby. Nathaniel Richard Caldwell, Rosalind said, looking at me. We decided to give him a middle name in honor of his dad. I nodded, unable to speak. It was a moment of triumph, a moment when all my plans began to take shape. After me, Viola also held the baby. I noticed how tenderly she looked at him, how carefully she held him, how she whispered something I couldn't hear. And again, I felt uneasy. Rosalind and Nathaniel were discharged 2 days later. I helped prepare the house for the newborn, showing my daughter how to swaddle, bathe, and hold the baby's head. Viola never left the baby's side, always ready to help, hold, or rock him. During the first week, I practically lived in their house. I slept on the couch in the living room and got up when Nathaniel cried at night, giving Rosalind a chance to rest. Viola also often stayed awake, sitting with the baby and singing him lullabies. One night I woke up to quiet crying. Nathaniel was restless and woke up often. I got up to check on him, but saw a light coming from the nursery. I quietly approached the door and peeked inside. Viola was sitting in a rocking chair, holding Nathaniel in her arms. She looked at him with such passionate tenderness that it seemed almost indecent to me. My little one, she whispered, stroking his cheek. My boy. I froze in the doorway, not knowing what to do. Something about her words, her tone felt wrong. She wasn't talking to him like an aunt, but like... Viola? I called softly. She flinched and looked up at me with frightened eyes. Mrs. Pembroke, I didn't notice you. I heard that Nathaniel woke up. Yes, he was a little restless, but he's calmed down now. I moved closer. You're so attached to him, I said, watching her reaction. He's a wonderful boy, she said, hugging the child a little tighter. So special. Yes, I reached out my arms. Let me hold him while you go to bed. It's late. She reluctantly handed Nathaniel to me, and I noticed her fingers linger on his blanket for a moment, unwilling to let go. Good night, Viola, I said firmly. Good night. She left the room, but turned at the door and looked at us for a long time. When she left, I sat down in the rocking chair, holding my grandson in my arms. Something was happening in this house, something I didn't understand, but which made me increasingly anxious. The next morning, I watched Rosalind. She was gentle with the baby, breastfeeding him, talking to him. But I thought there was something strange in her gaze, as if she was looking at him with a slight detachment, not the way a mother should look at her firstborn. At breakfast, I tried to find out what Viola's plans were. So, I said, spreading jam on my toast, have you found a new job in Milwaukee yet? Viola exchanged glances with Hugh. Not yet. I took a little time off to help Rosie with the baby. How sweet of you. How long do you plan to stay? Again, that look between brother and sister. We haven't decided yet, Hugh replied for his sister. Viola is a great help to us, and we're glad she's here. I looked at Rosalind, but she was silent, staring into her cup of tea. I returned home that day, but something was bothering me. Images and conversations swirled around in my head. My Barren sister showing up before giving birth, the conversations in the kitchen, the strange looks, Viola with Nathaniel in her arms whispering, my boy. I couldn't piece these fragments together into a coherent picture, but I felt that something disturbing was hidden behind them, something that could threaten my grandson, my family, my plans. The next day I went to see them again, determined to observe more closely. I had to understand what was going on, and if my suspicions were confirmed, but I couldn't even imagine what awaited me. That the truth would be more terrifying than all my guesses. and that I would have to act quickly and decisively to protect what was rightfully mine. They told me about it on the 5th day after Rosalind returned from the hospital. I arrived with lunch, chicken soup, and fresh pastries. The house was unusually quiet. Usually, when I came, Nathaniel was either sleeping in his crib, or Rosalind was feeding him, or Viola was carrying him around the house singing lullabies. But this time, only Hugh and Rosalind were sitting in the living room, holding hands on the sofa like a couple of teenagers in front of strict parents. Mom, Rosalind looked pale. I'm glad you came. We need to talk. I immediately sensed something was wrong. I set the basket of food on the coffee table and looked around. Where's Nathaniel? He's with Viola, Hugh replied. She's putting him to bed. Please sit down, Mrs. Pembroke, he added, pointing to the armchair opposite the sofa. I slowly sat down on the edge of the chair, keeping my eyes on my daughter. What's the matter, Rosalind? What's going on? She took a deep breath and squeezed her husband's hand tighter. Mom, we've made an important decision, a very important one, and I hope you can understand and support us. What decision? My voice sounded calm, but inside I was already feeling anxious. Hugh and I have decided. She paused, gathering her strength. We've decided to give Nathaniel to Viola. I didn't immediately understand the meaning of her words. They seemed absurd, meaningless, as if my daughter had suddenly started speaking in a foreign language. What do you mean, give? I asked, feeling my lips go numb. Do you mean that Viola will help with the baby? No, Mom. Rosalind looked straight at me, but there was a strange emptiness in her eyes. We want Viola to be his mother, legally. We'll arrange for adoption. I looked at Hugh. He sat with his back straight, clearly ready for confrontation. There was no shame or doubt in his eyes, only determination. Is this some kind of joke? I asked, still not believing my ears. No, Mrs. Pembroke, Hugh replied. We discussed this at length and made a conscious decision. Discussed at length? I felt a wave of anger rising inside me. Nathaniel is 5 days old. We talked about this before he was born, Rosalind said quietly. When we found out that Viola had virtually no chance of having children of her own, now everything became clear. The strange conversations I overheard, Viola's excessive concern for the child, her words, my boy. They had planned this from the beginning. You're out of your mind, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You gave birth to this child, Rosalind. You're his mother. How can you even think of giving him away? Viola needs him more, Hugh interjected, and I saw his eyes flash. She can't have children, and Rosie and I are still young. We can have more. That phrase hit me like a slap in the face. Viola needs him more, as if we were talking about a kitten or a puppy, not my grandson, my daughter's child. Give away my own child? I almost whispered, afraid that if I spoke louder I would burst into tears. The child you carried and gave birth to? Do you understand what you're saying? Mom, please, Rosalind looked at me imploringly. I know it sounds crazy, but Viola, she's suffering so much. After the divorce, after she found out she couldn't have children, it broke her heart. And we can help her. Help? I finally lost control by giving her my grandson, a child who carries the Pembroke genes, so that some woman from a family where the father was a truck driver and the mother worked in a laundry could raise my family's heir? Hugh tensed, his face darkening with anger. Don't you dare talk about my family like that. How should I talk about them? I stood up, towering over them. How should I talk about people who want to steal my grandson? No one is stealing anything, Rosalind said, her voice trembling. This is our decision, our child. Your child, I corrected her. Not his, not Viola's, yours, and my grandson. A heavy silence hung in the room. I looked at my daughter, trying to find a shred of common sense in her face, a hint of maternal instinct that should have rebelled against this madness. But all I saw was exhaustion and some strange determination. Where's Viola? I finally asked. I want to talk to her. She's upstairs with Nathaniel, Hugh replied. But I don't think... I want to talk to her, I repeated, heading for the stairs. When I reached the second floor, I went to the nursery. The door was ajar, and I saw Viola sitting in a rocking chair with Nathaniel in her arms. She didn't notice me, completely absorbed in the baby. She looked at him the way Rosalind must have looked at him, with endless love and tenderness. I knocked softly on the doorframe. Viola looked up and started when she saw me. "Mrs. Pembroke," she instinctively pulled the baby closer to her, as if I might take him away, which in fact was not far from the truth. "May I come in?" I asked, though I had already crossed the threshold. "Of course," she tried to smile. Nathaniel just fell asleep. I moved closer and looked at the baby. He was sleeping peacefully, his tiny mouth slightly open. In this light, I could see even more clearly how much he resembled Rosalind as a baby. "I've been told that you plan to be his mother," I said quietly, so as not to wake the baby. Viola paled but nodded. "Yes, Hugh and Rosalind, they suggested it. And I would very much like to." "Why?" I asked bluntly. "You don't have a husband, you don't have a steady income, you don't even have a place to live. Why do you think you have the right to take this child away from his real mother?" "I'm not taking him away," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "They offered it to me. And I'll be a good mother, I promise. I love him with all my heart." "You've known him for 5 days. Sometimes 5 minutes is enough to love for a lifetime." I looked at this woman, at her thin, freckled face, at her red hair escaping from her bun, at her trembling hands holding my grandson. And inside me, a cold, calculating rage grew. "You won't get him," I said quietly. "No way. That's not for you to decide." Viola looked up at me, and I saw unexpected determination in her eyes. "And Hugh and Rosalind, he's their child. He carries the blood of the Pembrokes, my blood, the blood of my late husband, and I won't let you take him away from our family." I turned and left the room, leaving Viola with the baby. Going downstairs, I saw that Hugh and Rosalind were still sitting on the sofa, waiting for my return. "I will not give my consent," I said, standing in front of them. "Never." "We don't need your consent, Mom," Rosalind replied wearily. "We've already contacted a lawyer. Everything will be officially documented." "You don't understand what you're doing," I shook my head. "You're giving away your child, your son. Will you ever be able to forgive yourself for that?" "I'll be there for him," she said, looking at the floor. "He'll know that I'm his biological mother. When he's older, we'll explain everything." "And what will you explain? That his real mother didn't want to raise him? That she gave him away like he was a useless thing?" "Stop it!" Hugh stood up, his face red with anger. "You don't understand anything. We're doing this out of love for Viola, who deserves to be a mother, out of love for the child, to whom she can give all her attention and care." "And you?" I looked at him with contempt. "What will you do while your sister is raising your child?" "Move on with my life," he shrugged. "Work. Maybe in a couple of years, Rosie and I will have another baby." At that moment, I realized that I hated him. Not just disapproved of or disrespected him, I hated him with every fiber of my being. This man who so easily gave up his child, his responsibility, who convinced my daughter to do the unthinkable. "You'll regret this," I said quietly, turning to Rosalind. "Believe me, you'll regret this decision every day of your life." "Mom." "I'm leaving. I need to think." I grabbed my bag and left the house without looking back. Once in the car, I allowed myself to do something I hadn't done in many years. I cried, out of rage, out of helplessness, out of a sense of betrayal. But the tears didn't last long. After a few minutes, I wiped my eyes and started the car. Edith Pembroke doesn't give up. Ever. When I got home, the first thing I did was take out the folder I kept in the safe behind the painting in the living room. It contained all the information the private investigator had gathered about the Caldwell family. I hadn't looked at it since Rosalind's wedding, believing the battle was lost. But now this information could be my weapon. I spread the papers out on the dining room table and began to study them methodically. Hugh Caldwell, 29 years old. Graduated from Milwaukee Community College with an average grade point average. He worked for several landscaping companies before starting his own business 5 years ago. The business was barely breaking even, although things had been looking up lately. But I wasn't interested in his business success. I was interested in his personal life. And there was something interesting there. Before he met Rosalind, he had been in a relationship with a woman named Cassie Wharton. They had been together for 3 years and, according to the detective, had even discussed marriage. But they broke up suddenly and for no apparent reason. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of a detective who had once worked for me. Fortunately, he was still in business and agreed to meet with me the next morning. The next item in my file was Viola Caldwell, 27 years old. She attended the same college as her brother but did not graduate. She worked as a waitress, then at a travel agency. She married Nate Banks 4 years ago and divorced him 6 months ago. The detective did not delve into the reasons for the divorce, but I was sure that this was key information. I wrote down Nate Banks' name, deciding that I needed to find him and talk to him. Perhaps he could shed some light on Viola's character, her obsession with motherhood, the reasons why their marriage fell apart. But the most interesting thing was what I found in the section about the Caldwell's parents. Their father, Howard Caldwell, was indeed a truck driver, but that wasn't all. In his youth, he had had problems with the law, petty theft, fights, even a short stint in prison. Their mother, Susan Caldwell, worked in a laundry but also moonlighted as a cleaner in motels where, according to rumors, she provided additional services to customers. I smiled as I looked through these records. The Caldwell family was not as simple as it seemed at first glance, and I could use that information. Then I moved on to the medical section of the file. Hugh was allergic to penicillin and had alcohol problems as a teenager. There was less information about Viola's health, but one important note. The patient suffers from endometriosis, which significantly reduces her chances of conceiving. IVF is recommended, but insurance does not cover the procedure. I thought about it. If financial difficulties were the reason Viola couldn't undergo IVF, that could be a clue. Maybe her obsession with Rosalind's child was not only related to maternal instinct, but also to money, with the possibility of getting something she couldn't afford. By midnight, I had a plan. I had found the weak points in the Caldwell family's history, the pressure points I could use. Now I had to act quickly and decisively. The next morning, I met with the detective in a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Mr. Reed was a man in his 50s with a tired face and attentive eyes. He remembered me and the Caldwell case. "What do you want to know, Mrs. Pembroke?" he asked, sipping his black coffee. "Everything about Violet Caldwell and her ex-husband, the reasons for the divorce, the details of their relationship, and I also need the address of this Nate Banks." "May I ask why you need this?" Professional curiosity flashed in his eyes. "Family business," I replied curtly. "Very personal." He nodded without pressing for details. "I can start today, but it will cost—" I named a figure twice his usual fee, and he agreed without further questions. After meeting with the detective, I drove to the Caldwell's house. I needed to talk to Rosalind alone, without Hugh and Viola. I hoped I could appeal to her maternal instincts, make her see the absurdity of the situation. I was in luck. When I pulled up to the house, Hugh was just leaving the yard in his pickup truck with the company logo on the side. He noticed me, but just nodded and drove off without stopping to talk. Rosalind opened the door with Nathaniel in her arms. She looked surprised but not hostile. "Mom, I wasn't expecting you today." "I couldn't not come," I said, entering the house. "Where's Viola?" "She went grocery shopping," Rosalind replied, closing the door. "Would you like some tea?" "No, I want to understand what's going on with you. How could you agree to this crazy plan?" Rosalind sighed and went into the living room, where she sat down on the sofa, rocking the baby. "I knew you wouldn't understand." "Who would understand? What mother would willingly give up her child?" "One who sees the person she loves suffering," Rosalind replied quietly. "You don't know Viola, Mom. You don't know what she's been through. Her husband left her when he found out she couldn't have children. He just packed his things and left, saying he wanted a normal wife who could give him children. That's sad, but it's no reason to give her your son. She deserves to be happy." Rosalind's eyes glistened with tears. "And she'll be a wonderful mother. Have you seen how she treats him? How she loves him? And you? Don't you love your son?" Rosalind looked down at the child. "Of course I love him, but I don't feel what I'm supposed to feel. That all-consuming love everyone talks about. That maternal instinct. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I looked closely at my daughter. Perhaps she was suffering from postpartum depression. That could explain her strange behavior, her willingness to give up the child. Rosalind, listen. I sat down next to her, trying to speak more gently. What you're feeling may be temporary. Many women experience this after giving birth. It will pass. But if you give the baby away now, there will be no turning back. She shook her head. It's not just me. Hugh wants this too. He loves his sister and is willing to do anything to make her happy. Even give up his own son? I didn't hide my skepticism. Don't you find that strange? They're very close. They always have been. Something in her tone made me wary. How close? Rosalind frowned. What do you mean? Nothing. I backed off, realizing I had gone too far. I just want to understand Hugh's motives. He's a good man, Mom, Rosalind said wearily. You never gave him a chance. I decided to change tactics. What about Nathaniel? He'll grow up knowing that his birth mother lives nearby but chose to give him to his aunt? We'll explain it to him when he's older. He'll know it was a decision made out of love. Love? I couldn't hide my bitterness. What love, Rosalind? Love for Viola. Love for the family. I looked at my grandson, sleeping peacefully in my daughter's arms. He looked so much like Richard, the same delicate features, the same shape of ears. The thought of him growing up away from our family, raised by a stranger, was unbearable. I can't let that happen, I said firmly, and I'll do everything I can to stop you. Mom, please. Rosalind looked frightened. Don't make this difficult. We've already decided. We'll see. I stood up, ready to leave. But know this. I won't give up without a fight. Nathaniel is my grandson, part of my family, and I won't let you take him away from me. I left, leaving Rosalind in tears. It hurt me to see her like that, but I knew I was doing the right thing. For her sake, for the child's sake, for Richard's memory. When I got home, I immediately called my lawyer. Mr. Connolly had been our family lawyer for many years since Richard's time. I outlined the situation to him and he agreed to meet with me the next day. I must warn you, Mrs. Pembroke, he said at the end of the conversation. In cases like this, the grandmother's rights are limited. If the parents voluntarily agree to the adoption, the law is usually on their side. Find a loophole, I demanded. Any loophole, I'll pay generously. That evening, Detective Reed called me. I have something interesting about Viola Caldwell, he said. She was treated by a psychiatrist after her divorce. She was diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder and depression. She was even scheduled for inpatient treatment, but she refused. Unstable psyche, I smiled at my thoughts. That could be useful. What about her ex-husband? Nate Banks lives in Milwaukee and works as a mechanic. I wrote down the address and phone number. Great, keep digging. I need everything you can find. I couldn't sleep that night, thinking through my strategy. I had several lines of attack. Viola's mental health, her parents' past, possible financial motives. But most importantly, I had to act quickly. If they had already contacted a lawyer, the adoption process could begin at any moment. The next day, after meeting with a lawyer who confirmed that my legal options were limited, I decided to meet with Nate Banks in person. I drove to Milwaukee, to the auto repair shop where he worked. Nate turned out to be a strong man in his 30s with tattoos on his arms and an open face. He was surprised when I introduced myself and said I wanted to talk about his ex-wife. Viola? He frowned. I haven't seen her in over a year. I'm the mother of Rosalind, Hugh Caldwell's wife, I explained, and I need your help. I told him about the situation with the baby, about Viola's plans. He listened with growing surprise. Damn, he said when I finished. That sounds like Vi. She was always obsessed with becoming a mother. So much so that it destroyed your marriage? He looked away, clearly unwilling to discuss personal matters with a stranger. But then he sighed. Yes, she wanted a child from day one. When she couldn't conceive naturally, the tests and procedures began. All our savings went to doctors. And then the diagnosis. Endometriosis, almost zero chance of getting pregnant without IVF. And we didn't have the money for that. And you left her because of that? I asked, trying to figure out if I could use him as an ally. No, he shook his head. I was ready to adopt a child. I suggested it to her. But Viola, She was fixated. She said that if she couldn't have a child of her own, she at least wanted a child from Hugh. From Hugh? I couldn't believe my ears. From her brother? Nate nodded, his face darkening. She said that if she couldn't have her own child, she wanted at least a child with family genes, so that he would look like her. She suggested that Hugh be the sperm donor. I refused. It seemed wrong, and then all hell broke loose. She fell into depression, stopped eating, stopped going to work. Sometimes I would find her sitting in the empty nursery we had prepared, staring into space for hours. The doctor said she needed serious help, but she refused. And you left, I finished for him. Yes, he looked me in the eyes. I couldn't take it anymore. She was no longer the woman I loved. She had turned into someone obsessed with motherhood, ready to do anything. That was exactly the information I was looking for. Viola was mentally unstable, obsessed with the idea of having a child with her brother. That could be used. Mr. Banks, would you be willing to testify? I asked. If it goes to court? He thought about it. I don't want to cause Vi any more pain. She's sick. She needs help, not more problems. We're talking about a child, I reminded him. A newborn baby they want to give to a woman with mental health issues. Do you really think that's the best option for him? Nate sighed. Give me your number. I'll think about it. I returned home feeling like I had a trump card up my sleeve. Viola's story was even more disturbing than I had imagined. And if Nate agreed to testify, it could be the deciding factor. That evening, Detective Reed called me with new information. I checked the Caldwell's finances. Hugh's business is on the verge of bankruptcy. He's had virtually no orders for the last 6 months. They're living mainly on your daughter's salary. What about Viola? I asked. What about her money? That's the interesting part. 6 months ago, she received an inheritance from her aunt, about $50,000. It's not a huge amount, but it's significant for them. I thought about it. Could Hugh's financial difficulties have played a role in this strange plan? Maybe Viola offered to help her brother financially in exchange for the baby. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Keep looking. I'm especially interested in any documents related to Viola's mental health. The next day, I went to see Rosalind and Hugh without warning. I needed to see the child to make sure he was all right. But most of all, I wanted to look Hugh in the eye, knowing what I now knew about his sister and their strange relationship. The plan was ready. I would use everything I had learned to destroy their insane idea, get my grandson back, and protect my daughter from the biggest mistake of her life. And I would stop at nothing. My plan was simple and ruthless, like all genius plans. Divide them, pit them against each other, bring to the surface all the dirty secrets they had so carefully tried to hide. The day after my conversation with Nate Banks, I learned from Detective Reed that the adoption papers had already been prepared. Rosalind and Hugh were supposed to sign them in 2 days, after which Viola would officially become Nathaniel's mother. There was little time left. I drove to their house early in the morning, knowing full well that Hugh would be home. He always worked from home on Thursdays. Rosalind usually took Nathaniel to the pediatrician for a routine checkup at that time, and Viola always accompanied them. I had about 2 hours to talk to my brother-in-law. Mrs. Pembroke? Rosalind isn't home right now, Hugh said, surprised, opening the door. I know, I replied, walking past him into the house. I came to talk to you. There were papers spread out on the coffee table. Bills, receipts, some business documents. Judging by his tense expression, the news was not good. Problems with the business? I asked, pointing to the papers. Nothing serious, he said, quickly gathering the documents into a pile. Just seasonal difficulties. What did you want to discuss? I know about your plan to transfer Nathaniel to Viola, and I came to say that I won't allow it. Mrs. Pembroke, I understand your feelings, but the decision has been made. Rosalind and I have thought it through. Really? I opened the folder and took out the first document, a printout of Viola's bank statement. And the decision has nothing to do with the $50,000 your sister inherited? Money that could save your failing business? His face froze, but only for a moment. Then he smiled, though the smile didn't reach his eyes. I don't understand what you're talking about. Viola's finances have nothing to do with our decision. No? I took out another document, a copy of the bill for repairs to his work truck, paid for with Viola's card. And this? And a dozen more bills like this? You're taking money from your sister, Hugh, and in return, you're giving her your son. It's called family support. His voice became sharp. We help each other, and the decision about Nathaniel has nothing to do with money. Then maybe it has to do with your past. I pulled out the next document, a police report about a bar fight Hugh had been involved in 10 years ago. Or your father's alcohol problems? Or the fact that your mother moonlighted as a prostitute in motels? Now his face was pale with anger. How dare you dig into my family's past? That's low, even for you. I'm protecting my grandson, I retorted. And I want to know what kind of family they're trying to give him to. You don't know anything about us, he said, standing up and clenching his fists. About what we've been through, how we survived. Yes, my father had a drinking problem. Yes, my mother did what she had to do to feed us. But they loved us and gave us everything they could. I smiled. He took the bait. What about your sister? Is she part of this real family too? Even when she suggested to her husband that he use you as a sperm donor to have a child with family genes? It was a shot in the dark based on what Nate Banks had said. But from the way Hugh's face twitched, I knew I had hit the mark. Who told you that? His voice became quiet, dangerous. Nate Banks. I met him yesterday. An interesting man. He told me a lot about Viola, about her obsession with motherhood, about her mental health issues. You wouldn't dare, he whispered. It would destroy our family. Would giving up the child not destroy it? I stood up, gathering the documents back into the folder. You have a choice, Hugh. Cancel this insane adoption. Bring my grandson back into our family. Or I'll tell Rosalind everything I know about your sister, your past, your financial shenanigans. That's blackmail, he said, looking at me with hatred. It's protecting the child, I corrected, and my daughter. You have until tomorrow. Think carefully. Next on my list was Viola. I couldn't talk to her directly, too risky. But I had another plan. I went to a cafe in the city center where I had arranged to meet Nate Banks. I've thought about your proposal, he said without preamble. About testifying, I can't do it. I nodded, expecting this. I understand, and I won't insist, but there's something else I wanted to ask. Here's a letter for Viola. I want you to take it to her today. There was nothing special in the letter, just copies of Rosalind's medical records showing her perfect physical health and ability to have more children, along with a short message. They're lying to you. As soon as they get your money, they'll find a way to take the baby back. I have proof. Meet me at Greenfield Park at 6 o'clock tonight if you want to know the truth. Rosalind remained. I needed to talk to her, but not directly about Viola or Hugh. That might trigger a defensive reaction. I decided to approach it from a different angle. Rosalind, how did the checkup go? I called her around noon. Everything's fine, Mom. Nathaniel is healthy and gaining weight on schedule. I'm glad. Listen, I wanted to apologize for my reaction to your decision. It was too harsh of me. Really? Her voice sounded skeptical. Yes, I still don't agree with you, but I understand that it's your choice. And I want to ask you for one thing, to spend a day with Nathaniel before you. Give him away. Just you, me, and the baby. No Hugh, no Viola. The last day he'll be your son. I don't know, Mom. Viola will soon be his mother for life. Don't I deserve one day with you and my grandson? You're right. Okay, tomorrow? Viola was going shopping in Milwaukee, and Hugh would be at work. After that call, I drove to Greenfield Park to prepare for my meeting with Viola. Mrs. Pembroke, Viola stopped a few steps away from me, not sitting down. What does this mean? How did you get Rosalind's medical records? Sit down, Viola. Let's talk like adults. She sat down reluctantly, holding on to the edge of the bench, ready to jump up and run away at any moment. What did you mean by they're lying to you? Exactly what I wrote, I smiled. They're using you, Viola. Your desire to be a mother, your money. That's not true, but her voice faltered. Hugh would never. Hugh is desperate, I interrupted. His business is on the verge of collapse. He needs your money, and he found a way to get it by offering you what you want most. A child. He suggested it, she whispered. Not me. Of course he did. Because he knew you wouldn't refuse, that you'd do anything to have a child, even give him all your money. I'm not giving him everything, she protested, but without conviction. I'm just helping with some bills. For now. What will happen when you run out of money? When they realize they can't milk you anymore? Do you think they'll let you keep the baby? Viola paled. They can't take him back. There will be papers. The papers can be contested, especially if the mother changes her mind. I leaned closer. And Rosalind will change her mind, believe me. I've seen the way she looks at Nathaniel. You can't fool a mother's instinct. And when she realizes she's made a mistake, they'll take the baby away from you and your money. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want you to be used. You deserve to be a real mother, not a fake one, not one who got the child by deception. Give up the adoption. Tell them you've changed your mind, that it's too much responsibility, that you're not ready. They'll hate me, she whispered. Hugh will never forgive you. Better to be hated than used. Think about it, Viola. Think about what's best for you, for the child, even for Hugh and Rosalind. The next morning, I went to Rosalind's as promised. She greeted me with Nathaniel in her arms, looking strangely tense. What's wrong? You seem upset. Hugh and Viola had a fight last night, she replied, rocking the baby. I've never seen them like that. They were yelling at each other and slamming doors. Viola even went to stay at a motel. What were they arguing about? I'm not sure. Something about money, about her feeling used. Hugh was furious, saying she was ungrateful after everything he'd done for her. How awful! I shook my head with feigned sympathy. And right before the adoption. Yes, I don't know what will happen now. Hugh said that everything was still on, that Viola was just nervous, but she looked so determined. Maybe it's a sign, I said, carefully taking Nathaniel from her. A sign that you shouldn't give up the baby. We spent the day together, just as I had planned. We walked with Nathaniel in the park, fed him, bathed him. I showed Rosalind photos of herself as a baby and told her stories from her childhood. Slowly, imperceptibly, I tried to awaken her maternal feelings. Towards evening, Hugh returned. He looked exhausted, his eyes red. Did Viola call? He asked Rosalind, ignoring me. No, didn't you talk to her? I tried, but she's not answering her phone. I hope she'll come to her senses by tomorrow. The lawyer will be here at 10 in the morning with the documents. I noticed Rosalind flinch at the mention of tomorrow. She looked at Nathaniel sleeping in his portable crib, and something like panic flashed in her eyes. What if she doesn't come? What if she really changed her mind? She won't change her mind, Hugh said sharply. I know my sister. She's just nervous. When I got home, I called Detective Reed. I need you to deliver something to Rosalind Caldwell, I said. Tonight, after her husband falls asleep. I put everything I had gathered about Hugh and Viola in the folder and added a short note. Read this before you give them your son. They are not who they seem to be. At 2 in the morning, Rosalind called me. Her voice was hoarse from crying. Is it true? What's in the documents? Every word, I have proof. Oh my God, she sobbed into the phone. How could I have been so blind? So stupid? Come to my place right now with Nathaniel. I'll help you sort everything out. I can't. What if Hugh wakes up? What if Viola comes back? Then wait until morning. But don't sign any papers. Don't give them Nathaniel. Promise me. I promise, Mom, I'm so scared. At 9:30, my phone rang. It was Rosalind. Mom, can you come? Right now? I arrived at their house in 15 minutes. There was an unfamiliar car in the driveway, probably the lawyer's. Come in, Mrs. Pembroke, Hugh said with icy politeness. We've been expecting you. Rosalind was sitting in the living room with Nathaniel in her arms. Next to her was an unfamiliar man in a suit, obviously a lawyer. And in the corner of the room, huddled in an armchair, sat Viola, pale and with red eyes from crying. I told them everything, Viola said suddenly, about how you came to see me in the park, about what you said, about how you tried to manipulate us all. I only told the truth about your past, about your inappropriate proposals to my brother. Shut up, she shouted, jumping up from her chair. You twisted everything. You took everything out of context. Congratulations, Mrs. Pembroke. You won. There will be no adoption. Viola is leaving today, and you will get what you wanted, a broken family. I only wanted to protect my grandson, I replied calmly, and your daughter. You wanted control, Rosalind interjected, unexpectedly sharply. As always, control over me, control over my child. Yes, Hugh and Viola didn't tell me everything. They had their secrets, their problems, like everyone else. But they never tried to use me. It was my decision to help Viola. My decision to give her a chance to be a mother. After everything you know now, do you still think it was the right thing to do? I don't know. But I do know that I can't trust you. I never could. You always manipulated, controlled, and made decisions for me. Mom, I want you to leave and don't come back, at least until we figure out what you've done. Okay, I finally said. But know this. I did it all out of love, out of concern for you and Nathaniel. I know, Rosalind replied quietly. That's the saddest part. I left the house feeling like I had lost the battle, but not the war. Yes, my plan didn't go as I had expected. Yes, Rosalind was angry with me. But the main thing was that the adoption didn't happen. Nathaniel stayed with his mother. And Viola was leaving. The Caldwell family was destroyed, just as I had planned. They might hate me now, but in the end, I had protected what was most important. My grandson, my blood, my legacy. And the rest could be fixed in time. I hadn't seen my daughter or grandson in 3 weeks. 21 days of silence, broken only by occasional messages from Detective Reed, who at my request continued to watch the Caldwell's house. His reports were sparse. Viola left the day after the scandal. Hugh is sleeping in the guest room. Rosalind often cries when she is alone. I did not try to contact Rosalind, even though it took a tremendous effort. Silence was part of my strategy. I knew my daughter. The longer she was left alone with her thoughts, the more she doubted the correctness of her decisions. On the 22nd day, the phone rang. Rosalind's number appeared on the screen. Rosalind, I said in a neutral tone, showing neither joy nor surprise. Mom, we need to talk, not on the phone. Can I come over? Of course. When? Tonight, around 7, and I'll bring Nathaniel. I'll be waiting. I spent the whole day preparing for their arrival. I made Rosalind's favorite dish, chicken cutlets with mashed potatoes. I baked an apple pie, the one she loved as a child. I checked the crib I had bought right after Nathaniel was born. Everything had to be perfect. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Rosalind looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, pale skin, her hair carelessly pulled back into a bun. Come in, I said, stepping aside to let her pass. She walked into the living room and carefully placed the crib on the sofa. Nathaniel was asleep, his tiny fist pressed against his face. He's so beautiful, I whispered, looking at my grandson. Mom, I didn't come here to reminisce about my childhood. We need to have a serious talk. Of course, I said, pointing to a chair. Sit down, I made tea. I'm leaving Hugh, she said without preamble. I'm filing for divorce. I tried to hide my satisfaction, but apparently not entirely successfully because she frowned. Don't rejoice prematurely, Mom. I'm not doing this because of you, and it's not because I think he's a bad person. Then why? I asked, pouring tea. Because there's no trust between us anymore. After everything that's happened, after everything I've learned, I can't be with him anymore. I can't look at him without thinking about what he's been hiding from me. I understand, I said softly. It's a difficult but right decision, Rosalind. You don't have to support me, she replied sharply. Not after what you did. You destroyed my family. You dug into Hugh's past, hired detectives, manipulated Viola, used my fears and insecurities against me. You did all this not for me, but for yourself. For your control over me, over Nathaniel. You're wrong. Everything I did was out of love. Mom, I came to tell you that I'm coming back to you. Temporarily. I couldn't hide my surprise. I have nowhere else to go. Her voice sounded bitter. I don't have the money for my own place. I'm on maternity leave with no income, and I can't stay in the house with Hugh anymore. You can always come home, I said, trying not to sound too pleased. I know. She looked at me wearily. You always plan everything in advance, don't you? You always know what's going to happen next? I'm just taking care of my family, I replied. You, Nathaniel. She nodded, but there was no agreement in her eyes, only resignation. The next few days were spent in the hustle and bustle of settling in. Rosalind brought her things and the baby's things, but I could see how she was suffering. How she often sat staring into space, phone in hand, as if waiting for a call that never came. How she cried at night, thinking I couldn't hear her. I tried to be sensitive, not to pressure her, not to remind her of my role in the breakdown of her marriage. Instead, I focused on Nathaniel. Every day she distanced herself more and more from the child, allowing me to take care of him. One evening, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Hugh standing on the threshold. He looked haggard, with stubble on his face and wrinkled clothes. "I need to talk to Rosalind," he said without greeting me. "She's not home," I lied, blocking the doorway. "And I don't think she wants to see you." "Please," his voice trembled. "I need to talk to her, to explain everything." "I'm afraid it's too late for explanations." I began to close the door. "Rosalind has made her decision, and I support her choice." "You!" His face contorted with anger. "You destroyed our family. You twisted everything, distorted everything. I loved Rosalind. I would never have hurt her." I heard footsteps behind me and turned around. Rosalind was standing in the hallway, holding Nathaniel close to her chest. "Hugh?" Her voice was barely audible. "Mom, please," Rosalind said. "I want to talk to him." I reluctantly stepped aside, allowing Hugh to enter. They talked for a long time in the living room while I pretended to read at the other end of the room. He explained that he had indeed hidden many details of Viola's past from her, but only out of a desire to protect his sister and a belief that it would help everyone. Rosalind listened, occasionally asking questions, but remained detached. At the end, Hugh handed her an envelope from Viola. "She renounces all claims to Nathaniel," Rosalind said after reading the letter, "and she apologizes for allowing her desire to be a mother to overshadow everything else." "She was never a bad person," Hugh said quietly, "just broken." When he left, Rosalind turned to me. "Are you satisfied?" she asked. "Did I get what I wanted?" "I just wanted to protect you and Nathaniel." "You were right that he was hiding a lot," she said, shaking her head. "But you're wrong about his motives, or Viola's motives. They're not the villains of your imagination, Mom. They're just people who made mistakes while trying to do something good." I didn't answer. There was no point in arguing now that I had won. The following months passed in a strange, tense truce. Rosalind took care of the baby, but she let me help, more and more each day. The divorce was finalized quickly and without fuss. Hugh demanded nothing except the right to see his son. One morning I woke up and sensed something was wrong. The house was unusually quiet. I got up and went to check on Nathaniel. His room was empty. No child, no crib, no toys. I rushed to Rosalind's room, empty. There was a letter on the bed. "Mom, by the time you read this, Nathaniel and I will be far away. I can no longer live under your control in your shadow. I can't let you do to my son what you did to me, turn him into an extension of your ambitions. I'm taking him away to give him a chance at a normal life. A normal family, the one you took away from us. Don't look for us. You won't find us. Goodbye, Rosalind." I sank down onto the bed, feeling the ground slip away from under my feet. My daughter, my grandson, they were gone. And I knew deep down where they had gone. To Hugh. I picked up the phone and dialed Detective Reed's number. But then I put the phone down. No, I wouldn't look for them. I wouldn't chase after them. I wouldn't interfere in their lives again. Instead, I slowly walked to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and sat down at the table, looking out the window at the empty garden where little Rosalind used to play. The garden where I hoped to see Nathaniel playing one day. I did the right thing, I told myself. I protected my grandson from a mentally unstable woman. I protected my daughter from a husband who lied to her. I acted out of love, always out of love. But then why was I left alone? In an empty house, with a letter full of accusations and a heart full of bitterness. The kettle boiled, but I didn't move to turn it off. Let it boil. Let it boil dry. Just like my life, my plans, my hopes had boiled dry. I won the battle but lost the war. And sitting in my perfectly clean, perfectly quiet kitchen, I finally realized that my victory was actually a defeat. That my love, the very love with which I justified all my actions, was not love at all, but a desire to control, to possess, to shape. But even now, even realizing this, I couldn't repent. I couldn't admit that I was wrong. Because deep down, I still believed that I was protecting them, that I was doing what I had to do. The kettle on the stove finally boiled dry, leaving behind only the smell of burnt metal and silence. The same silence that was in my heart.